we do it. Now, okay, share screen, and there we are. Kings 2. Yeah. So what? That is how we do it. Now. So what happened now? So that's the normal thing. However, there are various weeks where we add things, and in this case, we're going to add 2 sections. We're going to take out 3 Torah scrolls, because all the Torah readings come from different places. Because this Shabbat is Shabbat of Mishpatim. This Shabbat is also the Shabbat of Rosh Chodesh, and it is also Parshat Shekalim. Rosh Chodesh happens every once in a while. The first day of the month is Rosh Chodesh, and Shekalim is one of the special 4 Shabbatot. So a little bit of background to that. So
how do we satisfy all 3?
That's why I'm talking, Yossel.
Oh.
So we have 3 Torah readings. 1 Torah reading for the regular cycle, 1 Torah reading because it's Rosh Chodesh, and 1 Torah reading because it's Parshat Shekalim. Now, I'll get to what Shekalim is in a moment, but because we have 3 Torah readings to satisfy, we read all of Mishpatim in 6 rather than 7 aliyot. Then we read the Rosh Chodesh section as the 7th aliyah, and then we read Shekalim as maftir. Ashkenazic practice is that you do the special haftarah. What is the most special haftarah? The haftarah for Shekalim. So between the beginning of Adar, or right before Adar, and Passover, we read 4 special maftirs, 4 special number 8 aliyot, dealing with the time. Shekalim is the commandment to give a half shekel to support the sacrifices in the temple, which used to be given in Adar, so it would be ready for the new temple fiscal year in Nisan, Passover time. Secondly, we read Zachor, which many say is a biblical commandment. We read it before Purim in order to remember forever and ever what Amalek did to us and to maintain our vigilance regarding Amalek. Thirdly, we read a Parah, which is the parsha about the red heifer, because the Jews used to purify and sanctify themselves before going up to the temple, because everyone, including women and many children, would go up for Passover in order to share the Passover sacrifice, even though the pilgrimage was only a male obligation. And last of all, we read HaChodesh, which is about the Jewish calendar and introduces us to Passover. We read it, typically speaking, 2 Shabbatot before Passover. These 4 special parshiot are designed to keep us in connection both with our history but also with the temple. To remember that we not just mourn the destruction of the temple, but we anticipate its return and we keep it alive. So since the Torah reading is heard by everyone, we should be alive in our yearning for the temple and be aware that the temple is a huge missing hole in Judaism, and we yearn for its return and are in essence lacking and broken because we don't have the temple. Now, and in turn, at the very least, we celebrate what used to take place in the Beit HaMikdash. May it speedily be rebuilt, which is the feeling that these readings are supposed to bring us. Since these 4 Shabbatot related to Purim and Passover, these 4 maftirs, which is the final piece you read before the Haftarah, are the most special. In Ashkenazic practice, and in many other communities, it is our practice to read the Haftarah of the 4 Shabbatot. Other people read some of the verses of the other Haftarahs, but we read in our synagogue the Haftarot, these sections of prophets that go with these special 4 Shabbatot. And these Haftarot have a higher level than other ones. In other words, they are considered special to the extent that normally we allow a capable child to read the Maftir and Haftarah for these Shabbatot, for regular Shabbat, But even those communities like ours that allow a competent child to read Maftir and Haftarah during the year, we do not allow a child to read these four because they are special and need to be read by an adult. So that is the background to these haftarot. They represent the very special time from the beginning of Adar until the run up to Passover, which is a super central part of Judaism. And the haftarot once again relate to the parsha. So since we're reading about the half shekel, we're going to read about the restoration of the giving of the half shekel after a long break. However, to understand this, we now have to understand the history behind the restoration of Yoash as the king of Judea and the revolution that had to take place for it to happen. Okay, so now I'm just going to get my history out here. Okay.
What's going on here?
Someone's calling. It'll stop in a moment. Okay. Now I'm going to get my history out over here. Yeah, I'll disable the sound. Okay. Let's turn the sound off. Good. Okay, now, so where we are here is we're going to look at the particular moment in history.
I mean, just the introduction of yours is already enough to spend an hour in discussing.
That could be, but we have work to do.
Before we even read anything.
Okay, so why don't you briefly tell me what you want to discuss?
No, I'm saying you introduced already enough material to.
Well, if you have something interesting to say, please do so.
Well, you spoke eloquently about the missing temple that we want the temple to be built, but do you think that would be a good idea to build a temple now?
No, I told you many times, only when the Mashiach comes.
Oh, when the Mashiach comes, no, I agree, yeah.
Because right now we cannot build the temple because with the Mashiach will come a prophet who will tell us where to put the altar. We don't know where to put the altar.
I thought the altar is already built and God will drop it where he wants it.
What?
No?
No, that is spiritually speaking, but it's not the accepted halacha. That's midrash, not halacha.
That's midrash.
But so I want to share with you. So basically, what happened was when Yehu rebelled against Achav and killed all his kids, so there were 10 northern tribes separated. We've talked about this. They became a separate kingdom. Achav was a very well-known and wicked king, and there was a man named Yehu who rebelled against him and wiped him out, his family out, and him. And he met Achaziah, the king of Yehuda, and he killed him also, because Achaziah was the son-in-law of Achav and Izebel and Jezebel, the famous Jezebel. So this is the background. So when Achaziah was killed, Atalia, his mother, Atalia, his mother, she was the daughter of Atalia was the daughter of Izebel. Yeah, so Atalia was the daughter of Achav and Izebel. Okay.
Are they Yehuda? Is that a Yehuda king?
Yes. So the
Okay.
Yehuda married into, with terrible consequences, the family of Ahab and Jezebel. So when Atalia, who was this daughter of Jezebel and Achav, saw that her son had been killed by Yehu, so she saw a chance to make her own kingdom in Judea, because the king of Judea was killed in the revolution against Achav. So what did she do? She arose and killed all the descendants of Yehu. Everyone in the royal family, she executed them so that she should have power. But Yehosheva, who was the daughter of the king Yoram, the sister of Achazi. In other words, Yoram died. Yoram married Atalia. He died, and then Yehu died, and then Atalia killed all the other descendants of the king. But she was the sister of Achaziah. She took Yoash, the son of Achaziah, and she stole him away from the king's sons that were slain, him and his nurse, and put him in the bedchamber. Now, the Gemara says that the bedchamber actually refers to where the Shekhinah rests, that he was hidden in the attic above the Holy of Holies in the temple, where no one dared to go. And they hid him from Atalia, and he alone was not killed. And he was with her nurse, in the house of Hashem for 6 years. And Atalia reigned over the land. Now, Yoyada was the high priest, but because Atalia was worshiping the Baals and not God, his work was very curtailed because everyone followed the Baal. But in the 7th year, Yoyada went and sent. This is not the Haftarah. This is the introduction, by the way. But you need to understand it to understand the Haftarah. And he took the heads of the hundreds, L'Kariyu L'Rotzim, the elite infantry and the guard, and he brought them into the Beit HaMikdash, into the temple, and he made with them a covenant and made them swear, and he showed them the king's son. So these were the monarchy's loyal guards who had laid low, and he says, this is what you should do. A third of you come in on Shabbat, because people would come to the temple on Shabbat, and also those who watch the royal palace. The third at the gate Sur, which was a gate going out of the royal palace, and the third behind the guard. In other words, you're going to guard the front of the palace, the back of the palace, and the third will be in the temple. And the other 2 parts, who are going to go forth on the Shabbat, should guard the temple. Okay? So then I want you to surround the king. We're going to bring him out of the Holy of Holies. We're going to out of the attic. We're going to bring him into the courtyard of the temple, but I want you all around him, each person with their weapons in their hands. And anyone who tries to get to the king, kill him. And you will be with the king when he goes out. And the heads of the hundreds did everything Yoyada, the high priest, commanded. And each person took their men who come in on what does this mean, come in on the Shabbat and go out on the Shabbat? Because there were groups of priests. Every week there was a new group of priests. And with those priests, he intermingled the guards, the soldiers. And they all came to Yoda, to the Kohen. Now, the problem is that these guards had been fired, and they no longer had any power because Atalia put loyalists in. But there were weapons from the time of King David hidden in the attic. The Beit HaMikdash had many attics and hidden storage rooms. So the Kohen gave to the heads of the hundreds the shields and spears that belonged to King David, not just to King David, but to his guard, that were in the house of the Lord, that had been hidden there. David had left them there as a sign of his appreciation of God's help in his battles.
This is still the introduction?
Yep. This is the chapter before the Haftarah. And just to understand what happened. When the guard stood, every man with his weapons at his hand, from the right side of the house to the left of the house, this is the Beit HaMikdash, by the altar, and all around the king. And they brought out the king who was 8 at the time, was 8 years old at the time, and they put upon him the crown and the insignia, the thing a king wears around his neck, the signet, and they made him the king, and they anointed him with the special oil to anoint kings that was stored in the Beit HaMikdash, and they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." So Atalia heard all the noise of the guard and the banging of the weapons, and she came into Hashem's house, and she saw the king standing on the platform that the king used to read the Torah from, every 7 years, the year after sabbatical year, and the captains, and everyone is blowing the trumpets, and all the people were rejoicing. And Atalia tore her clothing, Vatikra kesher kesher, treason treason. Kesher actually means a nod. It means a plot, a plot. And Yoyada commanded them and said, "Take her out of the house of Hashem, and anyone who follows her, kill her, and anyone who follows her with the sword, because don't kill people in the Beit HaMikdash." And they made way for her, and she came they took her through the back door where the horses came, the garage entrance, and they killed her there. And they didn't kill anyone else because all the people who followed her stopped following her because they wanted their king. And Yoda made a covenant. Now, this is where the Sephardim begin the Haftarah. We don't begin it yet. Yoda made a covenant, and this all takes place around the year, this takes place the year 3061, which is about 700, somewhere between 700 and 850 BCE, depending on how you do it. It's about, let's say, 700 to 800 BCE. And all the people came to the house of the Baal, which Atalia had given precedence, the idols, over the Beit HaMikdash, and they destroyed all its altars and all its images. They broke good, and Matan, the king of the Baal, the priest of the Baal, they killed him before his altars. And the priests appointed people to take care of the Beit HaMikdash that had been neglected. And he took the captains and so on, and they brought the king, and he sat on the thrones of the king. And the people were happy, and the city was silent. Atalia had no following, and they killed Atalia with the sword in the house of the king. And this is where we, Ashkenazim, begin the Haftarah. So
first of all, what was the name of this 8-year-old king?
Yoash.
Oh, that's the famous Yoash.
Not Yoshiyahu, Yoash, but yeah, famous Yoash.
Well, he is the good king.
One of the good kings. Ben Sheva Shanim, this is about 120 years before Yoshiyahu. Ben Sheva Shanim Yoash b'mocho. Yoash was 7 years old when they made him king.
Wasn't his father Menashe?
No, that's Yoshiyahu's father.
Oh.
Bishnat Shevas Liyehu, in the 7th year of Yehu, his father, actually, he was a nephew of the previous king. His mother was the king's sister, and the mother was married. The mother was married to another descendant of David, like a cousin. So it's all David's descendants, but in a different line.
Where do we start? Where did you say we start reading the Haftarah?
Right here. Right here we begin the Haftarah. Yoash was 7.
Where is right here? Pasuk Hey?
Pasuk Aleph.
Pasuk Aleph.
Yeah, right here. See why I made it blue?
So this is the part that represents
Shkalim. You'll see why in a moment. You'll see why in one moment.
So which part represents Mishpatim? Or
Shkalim,
Mishpatim?
nothing. No, we don't do Mishpatim. Mishpatim is canceled. The Haftarah for Mishpatim, this is only about Shkalim.
Okay, so the first part is all about Shkalim.
Right. Well, this is the introduction. Now we come to the Shkalim. I just had to explain to you the history because most of us, most of us are not, thinking about the history all the time. So we have to know what happened. Now we know what happened in history. we can do this. So this is the Haftarah itself. Yoash was 7 years old when he became king.
Yes.
Bishnash Sheva Yehu. In the 7th year of Yehu, the king of Israel, of the 10 tribes, Yoash became king of Judea.
Mm-hmm.
And he ruled for 40 years in Yerushalayim. So he didn't live very long. V'shem imo, and his mother's name was Sivya Beersheva. So Yosheva saved her. It was the son of her brother, but it wasn't her son. Okay, his mother's name was Sivya. My grandmother-in-law, Chani's grandmother, was named Sivya. V'yaz Yoash hayosher b'nei Hashem. And Yoash did what was right in God's eyes all the days that Yehoyada HaKohen showed him what to do. However, several problems remain. This is throughout the first temple period. Habomot lo saru, the high places were not taken away. This means altars outside the temple. See, once the temple was built, the Torah forbids bringing sacrifices even to God outside the temple. But the people were used to their backyard barbecue altars, and they were constantly using these altars, even though people were commanded not to. The people were still sacrificing and offering in these bamot, in these altars. Now, Maimonides explains that the Torah wanted to reduce sacrifices only to the temple, because in the temple they have a special status, but otherwise we're supposed to outgrow sacrifices. And Yoash told the Kohanim, except for the temple, Yoash told the Kohanim. So now there was a problem. They had to pay because the temple service during Atalia had been very low. Now all the people coming to the Beit HaMikdash was broken. There was a lot of repairs that needed. So all the holy things that will be brought to the house of Hashem, all the money, what people bring, erko means when people promise to give their value to the Beit HaMikdash, or regular donations to bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priests take it, each person that gives him, and they would strengthen the cracks in the Beit HaMikdash, everything that needs fixing. The problem was that the Kohen, because each Kohen collected what he thought he needed and did what he thought he needed, so you had too many cooks, and it was in the 23rd year of Yoash's kingship, so he's now 30 years old. The Kohanim did not repair all the things that needed repairing. So Yoash called for Yoda and the Kohanim and says, why are you not fixing the Beit HaMikdash? Now you don't take money anymore. It'll go directly for the breaches of the house. In other words, you don't take the money and support yourself with it. And the Kohanim agreed not to take money from so it used to be the Kohanim got the donations. They fixed the Beit HaMikdash. So what was left, they lived from. So we say, no more. We'll find other ways to support you. You're not taking any more money, and you don't have to personally fix the temple. So what do? We have to reintroduce the half shekel. So the other Kohen took and the half shekel that we read about in the Torah. Half shekel is 2 dinar. It's about the size of a silver $50. And every Jewish male gave one, and that was what paid for the sacrifices and the repairs of the temple. It even paid for the roads and bridges leading to the temple. So Yoda Kohen took a box, and he made a hole in it. A chor is a hole. And he put it to the right of the altar. And whenever people came, the priests would put the money there. And when they saw there was a lot of money, and the king's right eye came up, and they put it in bags, and they would give the money that was cut out, and this was from the half shekel, to those who did the work. Because if I don't know, you have 500,000 people, and they all give half shekel, it's a lot of dough. And they gave it to the carpenters and the builders who work in the house of Hashem. Ulagodrim, to the masons, Chotze Evan, those who mine the stone, and to buy wood and to buy stone to strengthen the house of Hashem. The temple was in disrepair, and everything it needed. Now, however, out of the money donated from the half shekel, they did not make gold cups Mezamros, which mezamros are things to clean the lamps with. Mizrakos, things they spread blood from. Chatzotzros are trumpets. All the gold and all the silver that was not made from the half shekel that everyone, when they came to the Beit HaMikdash, put in the big money box, because
Rabbi,
those were separate donations. To do the work for the Beit HaMikdash, this is what it was used for. And by the way, the sacrifices.
Rabbi.
1 minute, I'm almost done. And they did not make an
I know.
account with the men.
That's
They
the
gave the
problem.
money because they dealt faithfully. In other words, the Israelites in Kohanim, in charge of dealing with the money, worked for free. They were volunteers. They were people of integrity. So we didn't want to insult them by asking them for an accounting. Now, money of forfeit, money of asham, where you swear falsely and have to pay extra, a fifth, money that was paid as a fine for abusing the priest, the truma the priests do, is not brought to the house of Hashem. That belongs privately to the Kohanim. But the money from the half shekel that was donated, plus extra donations added to that money, was used for the sacrifices and the repair of the temple. So we see how the temple fell into disrepair, both physically and spiritually. And when Yoash renewed the practice of giving the half shekel, that provided ample money, because so many hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, gave the half shekel. That provided the money both for the repair of the temple and all the sacrifices. So we see the resurrection and revival of the practice of everyone giving a half shekel, which traditionally the announcement was made in Adar, the beginning of Adar, as we are doing this week, that everyone should give the half shekel. We give a half shekel to charity on Tainus Esther as a reminder. Okay, so that is the Haftarah. And now I know people have questions and comments, so go for it.
Okay, since nobody's asking. So at this point, it might be maybe a good idea, since we're talking about Chatzi Shekel or Machatzita Shekel. Machatzita Shekel, the first time it's mentioned, I think, its purpose is to take count of the people.
No, that's one of it's the other way around. That when we count the people, we do it with a half shekel or with a lamb. And yes, the half shekels gave us a count, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to support the temple. The purpose is to support the temple. Incidentally, it gives us a count. And if we do want to make a special count, we either make an extra half shekel donation, or we have people give a sheep.
When is the first time that Machatzita Shekel is mentioned in the Torah?
Tisa, right after
and how is it mentioned there? Under what?
It's mentioned as part of the process of building the temple, building the Mishkan, the movable temple.
It's not mentioned about the Mishkan, but it's not mentioned as a way to count people.
It is also mentioned as a way. It has a dual purpose, as I said. It's mentioned as a way to count the people, because you don't count them directly. It's also a means of supporting all the activities in the movable temple and later the fixed temple. There's a primary purpose, the support, and a secondary purpose to count. And we're told to never count the Jewish people directly, but by a donation on their part. So that's why it begins, when you will count the Jewish people, you'll do it with the half shekel. But the half shekel also has the purpose of the primary purpose to support the temple. But it's also the correct way to count the people. So you're right, and I'm right.
No, but what if they want just to count the people, nothing to do with the temple?
Well, why not wait? Since people have to give half shekel every year. So wait a few months.
Because I know that King David got into trouble with calling an account.
Right, because he didn't wait for the half shekel.
But then that half shekel went into the treasury and was used to take care
of the temple, but not just the temple. all the sacrifices and all the roads leading to the temple and all the wells that people drew water from when they went up to the temple. Basically, it was for everything to do with the temple. But Joe is right. That is also the correct way to count the people. So if for some reason you have to do another count, like we know that after the business with Zimri, when many Jews died in the plague, Moshe made a special half shekel collection to see how many Jews were left. So Joe is right about that.
So when King David took the count,
He did it not with the half shekel and not with sheep.
That was
Another
the
time he
question.
counted them with sheep.
You mean he counted the legs divided by 4?
No, each person gave a sheep.
Okay.
So is that where it's written if they can't afford a sheep, they could do a pigeon or something
No,
like
that's
that?
with regards to sacrifices.
Huh.
Sounds like he didn't have any problem sleeping.
I was waiting for someone to say something like that. Okay, so there's a lot of history here and a lot of background. Anyone else have a question?
Okay. It's complicated. A lot of stuff here.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the interesting things is that there in the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, there was constant chaos. Kings were constantly, being supplanted by other people and being killed, and that chaos spilled over into Yehuda because the king of Judea had married his son to the daughter of Achav, and that chaos spilled over into the rule of Atalia and so on. The Judean kingdom, though they went through a lot of tough times and times when they didn't worship God and so on, but they had only the Davidic dynasty, so there was far less chaos and far less revolutions in the southern kingdom, in the kingdom of Yehuda and Binyamin.
This whole story before that you mentioned, it sounded, I thought there was a prohibition to bring weapons into a temple.
So there's a prohibition against using iron to cut the stones and to saw the wood of the Beit HaMikdash. That has to be done outside the temple. But weapons sometimes is a purpose. Now David had placed the weapons of himself and his guard there. Had placed himself and his guard there because whatchamacallit, because just 1 second, because had placed himself and the guard there because it was like his sign of gratitude to Hashem that he had succeeded in his wars and Solomon would have a peaceful kingdom. So he placed them there as a sign of gratitude to Hashem.
But in this case, they brought it in.
They were useful, yeah. Look, you don't typically bring weapons into the temple, but if you have to, you do. I mean, in other words, saving the kingdom and the king from this evil queen was necessary. You do what you have to save lives, to restore the proper dynasty of King David. That's because that's the way they look. In other words, if they would have tried to crown the king, this Atalia would have sent her soldiers and they would have slain the Kohanim. So what they did was very smart. They went as if they were going up to the temple in the usual changing of the guard. One family of Kohanim comes in on Shabbat, another family goes out, and they mixed themselves in and hid the weapons in the temple. And then when the people saw that there's men with weapons protecting the king, they expressed the loyalty to the king, and no one was left to defend Atalia. So this was a very well done revolution, or a coup, a very well done coup.
Cool, yeah.
Like in Burma, but in this case for much better reasons.
Lo aleinu, lo aleinu.
Yeah, I agree. Coups are a
Lahavdil,
bad thing.
lahavdil.
Lahavdil is good too. Yeah, I'm just saying this was a group of the military went and did what they had to do. Okay. Anyone else want to have any questions about the Haftarah? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Move on.
Okay. So now we can talk a little bit.
So far what we read is Cohen, the Cohen, Aliyat Cohen.
What?
So far what we read is the first Aliyah on
No,
Shabbos.
what we read is the whatchamacallit. What we read is the
Haftarah.
yeah. That's the Haftarah, yeah. And again, the purpose is to show how central the half shekel was, because it was a steady income stream. It made sure there was always enough, and because a half shekel isn't that much, everyone could afford to give it. It was an equalizer. And one of the reasons why everyone gives the same amount is so that when it comes to the sacrifices in the temple, which is the central expression of the religion of the Jewish people, everyone should have the same ownership. No one, we shouldn't say, oh, the rich and the wealthy and the powerful and the Kohanim. Everyone gives equally. Kohanim, Levites, Israelites, converts, everyone gives equally. And no one has a bigger share in the religion than anyone else. It's a very, very powerful idea. Okay. So that's the story. Now, just one more thing. So a few interesting things here. So it says that they didn't make an accounting with them because they dealt faithfully and they did it as volunteers. The people, however, the Gemara also says that when you go in, the Talmud says when you go in to collect the money, it's very interesting. When you go in to collect the money, you go in pairs, so no one could be accused of putting it in their pocket. And also, you have to go in. They went in with special robes. They wore robes in those days that had no pockets and no hems, so they had nowhere to hide. No one could accuse them of hiding the money.
Nishka Keshenes.
Yeah, no pockets. Right, exactly. In order to make sure that no one would accuse them of hiding it. Now, there's a famous story about pockets in Judaism. And the famous story is that the Gerer Rebbe, the Sfas Emes, actually no, his grandfather, the Chedushay Harim, objected to the new kind of shirt that had shirt pockets. Once pens were invented, people used to, not without a feather, but like fountain pens. People now had shirt pockets to put them in. So he says he doesn't like shirts with pockets. They asked him why. He said, we have an expression, a yid bizin keshenes, a Jew until the pockets, which means to say that he's a Jew until it comes to giving charity. He says at least when the pockets were only in the trousers, half of the person was a Jew. But now that you have a pocket in your shirt and you're only a Jew till your pocket, so now there's only a little bit of you is left to be a Jew. So that's...
there is a saying, deep pockets usually means he's worth a lot of money.
Right.
But then they added he has deep pockets but short arms.
Short arms, yeah, that's a very famous Yiddish line, yes. Yeah. Now, so the... So the Kohanim continued to receive individual donations and so on, but no longer the whatchamacallit, no longer the half shekel. And I should also point out that that this idea of the half shekel and this idea of equalizing is that even though in other things we all contribute differently, financially and otherwise, we should know that God rates each person's contribution the same. In other words, if you do everything you can, God doesn't see you as less than someone who does more, but has more capability. So there's the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, used to tell a beautiful story. He says that once going up to Jerusalem for one of the pilgrimage festivals, maybe it was Sukkot, everyone brought their offerings and the first fruits, and there was this very wealthy man who had a huge ox that he was bringing as a sacrifice. But the problem was the ox all of a sudden decided it didn't want to be a sacrifice. And a few miles out of Jerusalem, it sat down. And being a very big and strong ox, a very big bull, no one could pull it and make it go. Now, there was a poor person who was going up to bring vegetables from his garden to Yerushalayim. Now, you don't typically bring vegetables as an offering, but you can donate anything you want to the temple because the first fruits are not necessarily from the garden. At any rate, it was a voluntary offering. And he saw the rich man and his entourage struggling. So he had some celery and carrots or whatever it was, and he gave it to the ox. And the ox followed him because the ox liked the celery. And by the time they came to the Beit HaMikdash, the ox was there ready to be slaughtered as a sacrifice by the Kohanim. But the poor man's basket was empty, didn't have anything to give himself. So the Baal Shem Tov asked, who is the greater? And the answer is that the greater person here was the poor man who selflessly gave everything he had that he wanted to bring himself so that his neighbor, the rich man, should be able to bring the ox as a sacrifice on the Mizbeach. So even though the rich man brought a big sacrifice, the poor man who didn't even give anything, his merit is much greater because he gave his all to help another Jew do the mitzvah of bringing a sacrifice in the Beit HaMikdash. So the half shekel, which equalizes, that everyone gives the same amount, and that all the important things in the temple are paid for by the half shekel, is the idea that the temple, which is the central symbol of the Jewish people, is entirely functional, and its entire function is built on the equality of everyone. That everyone gives the same. Okay.
Okay, Rabbi.
I will conclude unless anyone has any further questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
I'm listening.
So you mentioned the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built when the Mashiach comes. How come there is a movement in Israel to build the temple now?
So the reason is as follows. It's a very good question, Joe. And yes, there is a small movement to build the temple now. And that's based on the idea that there's always a mitzvah to build the temple, and you can build the temple anytime you want, except the main purpose of the temple, says Maimonides, is to bring sacrifices on the altar. And the altar, Maimonides says, has a very precise precision, which means it has to be placed as precise as you can with the technology of the time, which means to the millionth of an inch today. So since we don't know where on the Temple Mount the altar was exactly, we can't build the Beit HaMikdash, which has to be built around the altar, until we know exactly where the altar was. Since we don't know, God has to tell us through a prophet. And that prophet, the Medrash tells us, will come with Mashiach. So everyone agrees, Joe, that there's an obligation to build a temple. Everyone agrees you have to know where to put the altar. So these people claim they know where to put the altar. But that runs contrary to Maimonides' ruling.
So that's contradictory to like the Haredi community.
Not
Some
Haredim. There are a lot of religious Zionists who follow Maimonides' ruling and therefore say we have to wait for a prophet to rebuild the
Yeah,
temple.
I'm sure.
Not only that, I can assure you, Rav Kook held like me, like Maimonides.
Yeah, he knew the consequences. So
Right, and more than that, people always ask me when Mashiach comes and you want to build the temple, what's going to be with all the stuff that's there now and all the people who worship there? So I'll say when Mashiach comes, as Maimonides says, the whole world will see the truth and worship the God of the one God in accordance with the Torah, though they don't necessarily have to become Jews. So I said, I can assure you that when Mashiach comes, the Arabs themselves will take down the mosque and make room to build the temple.
when the
Because they'll
Mashiach
know the truth.
comes,
And until that happens, until it's done peacefully, we're not going to do it. Because when Mashiach comes, everyone will know the truth and be happy to have a Beit HaMikdash built there.
Yeah, but we had another answer. When the Mashiach came, and Mehubma Asidonu.
A what?
Asidonu. A Suda.
Yeah, that's something else. The great meal of the coming of Mashiach is a completely separate thing.
And then what are we going to eat? The Leviathan.
And the Shor Habar. And the great ox of the wild.
Right.
So
and
the
Torah,
question is, if you have the great ox, there's a very famous Yiddish joke about this. If you have the great ox, right, why do you need the fish for? Why do you need the Leviathan also? So the Gemara says that God himself will slaughter this great ox, right? These are all deep spiritual symbolic ideas. But for the purpose of this Yiddish joke, we're going to take that God will slaughter the ox. So what's going to be the problem? There are going to be some people there who are so religious, they won't even trust God's shechita. They won't even trust God's kosher supervision. Therefore, they're going to ask for fish. So Hashem will already have fish prepared for them because they can ask for a fish course because they don't trust Hashem's shechita.
Actually, it's a very nice song that we sing.
Yeah, so yeah, it's there's a fellow Avram Fried. He has a bunch of songs from they're called Yiddish gems. I forget the name. Someone who survived the war, who put together Avram Erlich. So he put together a whole bunch of Yiddish songs, and Avram Fried sings them. Let me see if I can find it. A minute.
So that's a famous song. It's a famous melody.
Yeah, but there's a really beautiful version of it. I want to find it.
Yeah, and the Chochma is going to be done by Shlomo Melech, and David will play.
Hey, you want to hear Shlomo Bekel singing it? Theodor Bekel singing it?
Sure, why not?
Here we go. So this is the song that Joe is referencing.
Oh yeah, I have this record.
This is the great meal when Mashiach comes.
Asodenu. Oh, that goes on like Miriam and Via.
Yeah, so this says, who's gonna play music? Miriam and Avia. Who's gonna sing? David is gonna sing. Because all the figures at this great meal, all the figures who lives will arise with the Tchiyat HaMeisim, with the resurrection of the dead, which is a fundamental belief in Judaism. Yeah. So all these great people will be there.
King. Tanzen?
Yeah, Miriam danced at the sea.
I think it's stuck. It's an old record.
Okay, so the end says that King Solomon will say words of wisdom, and
Moshe Rabbeinu Torah.
will teach us Torah, and Miriam will dance, and King David will play the music, and will drink the wine that is hidden from the beginning of creation. Some say from the tree of knowledge, and so on. So that's the song that Joe's referring to. But at any rate, until that happens, we're not going to have we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, but we yearn for it. But we also believe it's a fundamental principle of Jewish belief that the Mashiach will come, that there will be a final redemption, and the Jewish people will return to Israel, the temple will be built, and the whole world will acknowledge the truth of God and the Torah and live in peace and harmony with each other. And we believe that this can happen in an instant when God so desires.
Okay. Sounds good, Rabbi.
Yeah, what should we call it? You know, it says in the Gemara that Ein Ben David Bala Be'esachadas. The Talmud says Mashiach will only come in distraction, which means to say when we look around the world and we say, like maybe Joe does, hey, this can't be, this can't happen, it's impossible. The moment when it seems most impossible is when it's likely to happen. Okay, so that's the scoop. At any rate,
Rabbi, I mean, I don't know about the scoop. So far, it sounds like we were just discussing the Chatzi Shekel, the Shkalim. What about the other two parts?
what other two parts? Oh, yeah, because that's the this class discusses the Haftarah. The Haftarah is about Parsha Shkolim. We're not doing the other Haftarah this week.
I thought we also read something about
Rosh Chodesh?
Rosh Chodesh, yeah.
But we don't read a Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh. And we read Parshat Mishpatim, but we don't read a Haftarah for Mishpatim.
And we don't read anything about Amalek either.
No, Amalek is the next week.
Oh, you mean
yeah,
Zachor?
Next week we're going to read the Haftarah about King Saul messing up.
What is that? Parshat Zachor?
Yeah.
Oh.
My bar mitzvah parsha.
Okay.
Okay,
good.
so have a very good week, everyone, and we can come join us tomorrow for Talmud, for Torah, as you wish. All the best.
All aboard.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Yeah, take care.
much,
Joe, Sylvia,
Rabbi.
Michael, Bobby, have a good night. And anyone watching this on YouTube, all the best.
All the best.